Today, we bring you one of the most impactful events recorded in Virginia during the war. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're viewing from and the exact time you're listening to this narration. We're interested to know what places and times of day or night these documented accounts reach. The sound of boots struggling through mud and water punctuated the darkness before dawn on September 29, 1864. Through the swampy terrain of 4 Mile Creek, regiments of the United States colored troops moved forward silently, their weapons gripped tightly as they approached the Confederate fortifications atop Newmarket Heights. None of them knew that within hours they would etch their names into history with a feat of extraordinary valor, while their white commanders watched from a distance, some with skepticism, others with silent anticipation. 8 miles southeast of Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy, Newmarket Heights stood as a critical defense position. The well-entrenched Texas Brigade, veterans of numerous battles and considered among the elite of Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, waited behind formidable earthworks. The black soldiers advancing toward them faced not only deadly fire, but also the weight of proving themselves in combat, a test that many in the Union Army doubted they could pass. Major General Benjamin Butler, commander of the Army of the James, had deliberately selected these black regiments for this mission. "I wanted to convince myself whether the Negro troops will fight," he later wrote in his personal records. As dawn approached on that autumn morning, the fate of these soldiers, and perhaps the reputation of all African-American troops, hung in the balance. What followed would become one of the most extraordinary yet overlooked chapters of the American Civil War. In the months and years that followed, fragments of records, diaries, and conflicting accounts would emerge. Some described acts of uncommon valor, others told of strategic errors and unnecessary losses. 14 black soldiers would receive the Medal of Honor for their actions that day. But questions remained about what really happened when the black troops took Newmarket Heights, while the generals watched in silence. This is that story. Chapter 1. The Gancho Impossible. A single sheet of paper lay on the desk of Lieutenant General Ulysses S. Grant on the evening of September 28, 1864. It contained orders for a coordinated assault on the Confederate defenses around Richmond and Petersburg. This operation, Grant's 5th offensive since June, was designed to prevent General Robert E. Lee from reinforcing his troops in the Shenandoah Valley, where Union forces had recently secured victories. According to military records later recovered from the headquarters of the Army of the Potomac, Grant's plan called for a two-pronged attack. While Major General George Meade's forces would strike southwest of Petersburg to cut vital supply lines, Butler's Army of the James would launch an assault north of the James River to threaten Richmond directly. What made this particular order unusual was a handwritten notation in the margin, found years later when the document was catalogued for the War Department archives. The notation, in Grant's distinctive handwriting, read, "Butler's colored troops to lead assault at Newmarket Heights." It was a decision that raised eyebrows among several of Grant's staff officers, though none voiced their concerns openly to the commanding general. Captain Thomas Wilson, a staff officer whose private diary was discovered in 1923, wrote on the night before the battle, "Orders came down today placing the colored division of Payne at the front of tomorrow's attack on Newmarket Heights. The men are untested in such a direct assault against entrenched positions. Birney seems confident, but others wonder if this is wise. The general says it is time to see what they can do." What Captain Wilson and others did not know was that Benjamin Butler had personally advocated for this assignment. A political general with a mixed military record, Butler had been an early champion of enlisting black soldiers. According to correspondence between Butler and Secretary of War Edwin Stanton dated July 1864, Butler had written, "These men deserve the chance to prove themselves in a significant engagement." They believe they will fight with particular determination against those who would keep them enslaved. But there was another anomaly that would only become apparent after the battle. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Thompson of the 6th United States Colored Infantry noted in his official report, filed October 1, 1864, that the terrain in front of the Newmarket Heights position was particularly difficult, with marshy ground and 2 lines of abatis protecting the Confederate entrenchments. Thompson questioned why more detailed reconnaissance had not been conducted, given that this information would have been vital for planning the attack. Major James Anderson of the Army Engineer Corps later admitted in an 1872 interview with the New York Herald that he had surveyed the approach to Newmarket Heights 2 weeks before the assault and filed a detailed report describing the obstacles. I mapped the double line of abatis, the marshy terrain, and the cleared fields of fire. It would be a difficult position to take under the best of circumstances, Anderson stated. When asked what became of his report, he replied, "I was told it was delivered to headquarters. Beyond that, I cannot say." No copy of Anderson's reconnaissance report was ever found in the official records of the Army of the James or in Butler's personal papers. Yet the black regiments were ordered to assault precisely this difficult position, with minimal artillery preparation and without the benefit of Anderson's detailed terrain assessment. As the soldiers of the United States Colored Troops moved into position on the night of September 28th, they did so without knowing the full extent of the challenge that awaited them. The missing reconnaissance report would remain one of several unexplained gaps in the documentation of what was about to unfold at Newmarket Heights. Chapter 2. The Calmaria that hides everything. The evening of September 28th found the men of the 3rd Division, 18th Corps, bivouacked near Deep Bottom on the James River. This division, commanded by Brigadier General Charles Payne, consisted entirely of United States Colored Troops, the 4th, 5th, 6th, 36th, and 38th Regiments, organized into 3 brigades led by Colonel Samuel Duncan, Alonzo Draper, and John Holman. Sergeant Major Christian Fleetwood of the 4th United States Colored Troops, who would later be awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions, wrote in his diary, "Orders came at sunset for us to prepare 3 days' rations and be ready to move at a moment's notice. The men are quiet but anxious. We know something significant is coming, though the details are kept from us." The routine of camp life continued despite the tension. Corporal James Harris of the 38th USCT, randomly selected from regimental records according to standard procedure, described the evening in a letter to his sister dated October 3rd. "The night before the fight was like many others. We cleaned our rifles, checked ammunition, and some men wrote letters home. Sergeant Jackson read from his Bible as he often did. A few played cards. Most were silent, thinking of what morning might bring. At the headquarters of the Texas Brigade, the mood was markedly different. According to the journal of Captain Milton Calloway of the 5th Texas Infantry, the evening passed with the usual camp activities. Nothing unusual to report. Pickets noted increased activity across the river 2 days ago, but all seems quiet now. The men had a hot meal tonight and spirits are good. We continue to strengthen our positions as time allows." The contrast between the two forces extended beyond their activities that night. The Texas Brigade, commanded by Brigadier General John Gregg, consisted of battle-hardened veterans who had fought in nearly every major engagement in the Eastern Theater. These were the men who had earned General Lee's praise as his Grenadier Guards. Alongside them were dismounted cavalry from Virginia and South Carolina under Brigadier General Martin Gary, supported by the Rockbridge Artillery and Richmond Howitzers. Their position atop Newmarket Heights was formidable. The Confederate works consisted of multi-layered breastworks fronted by a double line of abatis. Sharpened tree branches pointed toward the attacking force. From this elevated position, They had clear fields of fire across the open ground that any attacking force would have to cross after emerging from the marshy valley of 4 Mile Creek. According to the regimental history of the 5th Texas, compiled in 1891, the position at Newmarket Heights was considered particularly strong. The natural features of the ground gave us every advantage, and we had worked diligently to enhance these with our entrenchments and obstacles. It would be a costly position to attack, and we felt confident in our ability to hold it against superior numbers. What neither the men of the Texas Brigade nor the black troops preparing to attack them realized was that higher strategic considerations were already shaping their fate. Lieutenant Richard Thompson, an aide to General Birney, recorded in his personal journal that at 10 o'clock that night, a courier arrived from Grant's headquarters with sealed orders. Thompson wrote, "General Birney read the dispatch and immediately sent for General Payne. Their conference was brief, after which new orders were issued to the division commanders. Something has changed in our plans, though we junior officers are not privy to what. The change involved timing. Originally, according to preliminary orders found in the 18th Corps records, the attack was to begin with a substantial artillery bombardment at first light, followed by the infantry assault. The new orders called for the infantry to advance before dawn with minimal artillery support. No explanation for this change was recorded in the official communications. Years later, in an 1883 interview with the Army and Navy Journal, Brigadier General John Kautz, who had served as Butler's artillery commander, stated, "I was surprised when the final orders came down, reducing the artillery preparation almost to nothing. When I asked for clarification, I was told the element of surprise was now deemed more important than softening the enemy position." As the men of both armies settled in for the night, routine activities masking the tension of what was to come, crucial decisions had already been made that would significantly impact the coming battle. The full extent of these decisions and the reasoning behind them remained obscured, hidden in the calm before the storm that would break over Newmarket Heights the following morning. Chapter 3. The Trigger. The first hint of dawn barely illuminated the eastern sky when the order came to advance. It was 4:30 in the morning, September 29, 1864. The men of Colonel Samuel Duncan's 3rd Brigade, comprising the 4th and 6th United States Colored Troops, moved forward as the vanguard of the attack on Newmarket Heights. According to the official report filed by Colonel Duncan on October 2nd, his brigade advanced in column by division closed in mass, meaning the regiments moved in tight formation. The report continued. The men were ordered to maintain absolute silence, with caps removed from their rifles to prevent accidental discharge. This detail, seemingly minor, would later become significant in post-battle analyses. The marshy terrain of 4 Mile Creek immediately presented challenges. Captain Louis R. Fortescue of the 6th USCT recorded in his journal, "The men struggled through water sometimes knee-deep, maintaining formation as best they could in the darkness. The mud pulled at our boots with each step, making progress painfully slow and exhausting the men before they even faced enemy fire." Unknown to the advancing Union troops, Confederate pickets had already detected their movement. Lieutenant James Langhorne of the 3rd Texas Infantry noted in his after-action report, "Our forward pickets observed enemy movement at approximately 4 o'clock in the morning. The alarm was passed quietly along the line, and our men were roused and at their positions well before the attackers emerged from the creek bottom." This critical intelligence failure, the loss of surprise, was never fully explained in Union records. Major William Howard, Butler's intelligence officer, wrote in a memorandum dated October 5th, "Reports indicate that our troop movements were observed earlier than anticipated." The source of this intelligence failure remains under investigation. No follow-up document was ever filed. As Duncan's brigade emerged from the creek bottom into more open ground around 5:15 a.m., they encountered the first obstacle, a line of abatis, sharpened tree branches entangled and pointing outward. Beyond this stood a second line of abatis, and beyond that the Confederate earthworks crowning Newmarket Heights. The first shots rang out at 5:20 a.m. According to Sergeant Elijah Brown of the 4th USCT, the rebel fire erupted suddenly and with terrible intensity. Men began falling immediately. The abatis trapped us in the open, easy targets for their rifles and artillery. Confederate artillery officer Lieutenant Thomas Green of the Richmond Howitzers wrote, "As soon as their formations became visible in the growing light, we opened fire with canister." The effect was devastating at such close range against their massed formations. The Union plan began to unravel quickly. Colonel Duncan was severely wounded early in the assault. Command devolved to Lieutenant Colonel George Rogers, who was killed minutes later attempting to rally the men through the abatis. The regimental color-bearer of the 4th USCT fell, then his replacement, and then a third man who took up the flag. It was at this moment that Sergeant Major Christian Fleetwood seized the colors. According to his Medal of Honor citation, he seized the colors after 2 color-bearers had been shot down and bore them nobly through the fight. Sergeant Alfred Hilton of the 4th USCT, already carrying his own regimental colors, grabbed the U.S. flag as well when its bearer fell. When Hilton himself was wounded, he passed both flags to other soldiers rather than let them fall to the ground. The initial assault stalled in the face of withering Confederate fire. By 6 a.m., Duncan's brigade had suffered nearly 50% casualties without breaching the Confederate position. Colonel Alonzo Draper's 2nd Brigade, consisting of the 5th, 36th and 38th USCT, was ordered forward to reinforce the attack. From an observation position approximately 800 yards behind the front line, General Butler and his staff watched the unfolding battle. Captain Nathan Edgerton, one of Butler's aides, recorded in his diary, "The general observed the advance through his field glasses, saying little. When word came of the heavy casualties among Duncan's men, he simply nodded and said, 'Send in Draper's brigade. They must take that position.'" The battle was now fully joined. The trigger pulled on what would become one of the most significant engagements involving African-American troops during the Civil War. But as reports of mounting casualties came back from the front, some officers at Butler's headquarters began to question whether the attack could succeed against such strong defenses. Chapter 4. The Convenient Explanation. By 6:30 on the morning of September 29th, the assault on Newmarket Heights appeared to be failing. Colonel Duncan's brigade had been shattered, and Colonel Draper's men were now facing the same deadly fire as they attempted to navigate the obstacles and reach the Confederate works. At Butler's headquarters, tensions were rising. According to Lieutenant Frederick Manning, a staff officer whose account was published in the Boston Journal in 1872, a heated exchange took place between Butler and Brigadier General William Birney, commander of the 2nd Division of the 10th Corps. Manning wrote, "General Birney approached Butler, visibly agitated, and suggested withdrawing the colored troops and sending in his white divisions instead. 'Those men cannot take that position,' Birney argued. 'They're being slaughtered to no purpose.' Butler's response was terse. 'They will take it or fail trying. The attack will continue as planned.' This exchange, though reported in Manning's account, does not appear in any official records. When questioned about it in 1875, Butler denied that such a conversation had taken place, stating in a letter to the editor of the Army and Navy Journal, "General Birney at no point suggested withdrawing the colored troops." He maintained complete confidence in their ability throughout the engagement. On the battlefield, the situation remained dire. Lieutenant Peter Vogelsang of the 38th USCT later wrote, "We could see our comrades from Duncan's brigade lying where they had fallen, the abatis holding many of them fast, even in death. Yet the order came to advance through the same ground, against the same fire. Confederate Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Fremantle, a British observer attached to the Texas Brigade, noted in his journal, "The Federal troops showed remarkable courage, advancing again and again, despite terrible losses. It was particularly striking to see the colored troops pressing forward with such determination. Several of their officers had fallen, yet they continued to advance. By 7 a.m., something unexpected happened. Lieutenant Colonel Edward Wright of the 36th USCT reported, "Suddenly the enemy fire slackened. At first we thought it might be a ruse, but as we pushed through the second line of abatis, we encountered only scattered resistance." The main Confederate force appeared to be withdrawing. This sudden reduction in Confederate resistance has been the subject of historical debate ever since. The official explanation provided by Confederate General John Gregg in his report, dated October 1st, was straightforward. "Upon receiving intelligence that Fort Harrison had been captured, threatening to turn our entire position, I ordered a tactical withdrawal from New Market Heights to reinforce our secondary line of defenses." This explanation became the standard Confederate account. It suggested that the black troops had not captured New Market Heights through force of arms, but had merely occupied a position abandoned for strategic reasons unrelated to their assault. Union accounts contradicted this. Colonel Draper's official report stated explicitly, "The men of my brigade, supported by the remnants of Duncan's command, fought their way through the obstacles and drove the enemy from their entrenchments by direct assault." Sergeant Major Thomas Morris of the 38th USCT was even more direct in a letter discovered in 1912. "We drove them out at the point of the bayonet. They did not leave until we were upon them, and even then, some fought hand-to-hand in the trenches before retreating." The conflicting accounts might have remained simply a matter of perspective had it not been for a document discovered in 1922 among the papers of Lieutenant James Houghton, an aide to Confederate General Martin Gary. The document, a dispatch timed at 6:45 a.m., read, "Enemy-colored troops breaking through left sector. Position becoming untenable. Request immediate reinforcement or authorization to withdraw." This dispatch, sent 15 minutes before the reported time of the order to withdraw based on news about Fort Harrison, suggested that the Confederate position at New Market Heights was indeed being overrun by the black troops before any strategic withdrawal was ordered. The conflict between these accounts was never officially resolved. In the aftermath of the battle, as casualties were counted and reports filed, the convenient explanation that the position had been abandoned for strategic reasons rather than lost to direct assault became the predominant Confederate narrative. Lieutenant George Wilson of the 5th Texas Infantry perhaps best captured the ambiguity in his diary entry for September 30th. "We withdrew from New Market Heights yesterday by order, though in truth, the withdrawal was becoming necessary regardless of orders. The Federal colored troops fought with unexpected determination and were breaking through our left by the time the order came." The convenient explanation allowed both sides to maintain their preferred narratives. For the Confederates, that they had withdrawn according to strategic necessity rather than being defeated. For the Union commanders, that their black troops had successfully taken their objective through courage and determination. The truth, as is often the case in the fog of war, likely contained elements of both accounts, though conclusive evidence remained elusive in the contradictory records of that bloody morning. Chapter 5. The Echoes of Silence. In the days and weeks following the Battle of New Market Heights, an unusual quiet settled over official communications regarding the performance of the United States colored troops. This silence, particularly from the highest levels of Union command, stood in stark contrast to the magnitude of what had occurred. The first indication of this phenomenon appeared in General Butler's initial report to Lieutenant General Grant, dispatched on the evening of September 29th. The brief message preserved in the official records of the War of the Rebellion stated only, The enemy's works at New Market Heights have been captured. Our forces now hold the New Market Road. Casualties have been significant, but acceptable given the objective secured. No specific mention was made of the fact that it was black troops who had carried the position, nor of their extraordinary casualties, over 800 men out of approximately 2,000 engaged, including more than 130 killed. This omission did not go unnoticed by officers within the colored regiments. Captain Nathan Edgerton of the 6th USCT noted in his diary entry for October 3rd, "The men are beginning to ask why there has been no official recognition of what they accomplished. Their sacrifice was immense, their courage undeniable, yet headquarters seems reluctant to acknowledge it directly." On October 5th, a more detailed report was filed by Butler, which did acknowledge that Payne's division of colored troops had carried the New Market Heights position. However, the report devoted significantly more space to operations conducted by white troops at Fort Harrison and elsewhere along the line. When casualty figures were listed, they were presented as aggregate numbers without distinguishing between units. This pattern continued in subsequent communications. A review of telegrams sent between Grant's headquarters and Washington between October 1st and 15th, 1864, reveals not a single specific mention of the USCT performance at New Market Heights, despite extensive discussion of other aspects of the operation. The silence extended to the Northern press as well. James Gordon of the New York Herald, embedded with the Army of the James, submitted a detailed account of the battle on October 2nd that specifically praised the conduct of the black troops. According to a letter Gordon sent to his editor, discovered in the Herald archives in 1910, the article that appeared in print on October 7th had been heavily edited, with most references to the USCT achievements removed or minimized. Gordon wrote, "I cannot understand why my reporting on the colored troops has been so thoroughly excised. Their performance was the most remarkable aspect of the entire operation, yet in print they have been reduced to a footnote." Even more telling was the absence of the battle from official military analyses. Major William Hurst of the War Department's Bureau of Military Information compiled a report in November 1864 titled Strategic Engagements of the Richmond-Petersburg Campaign, which included detailed assessments of various actions around the Confederate capital. New Market Heights received only a single paragraph, with no analysis of tactics or performance. This pattern of official silence had tangible consequences. Captain Louis Fortescue of the 6th USCT wrote in his journal on October 25th, "The men feel the slight keenly. They see reports of other engagements where white troops receive immediate commendation. Their own achievements, bought at such terrible cost, seem to have been deliberately minimized." The silence was not universal, however. Within the Army of the James, particularly among those who had witnessed the battle firsthand, there were significant voices acknowledging what had occurred. Colonel Samuel Armstrong, who would later found Hampton Institute for the Education of Freed Slaves, wrote in a letter dated October 20th, "I have never seen such courage as was displayed by the colored troops at New Market Heights. That their achievement has not been more widely recognized is, to my mind, unconscionable. Perhaps the most significant break in the official silence came not through formal channels, but through Butler's personal initiative. In November 1864, according to Quartermaster records, he commissioned at his own expense the design of a special medal to be awarded to black soldiers who had distinguished themselves in the battle. This Butler Medal, as it came to be known, was not an official army decoration, but a personal recognition from their commanding general. The medal bore the Latin inscription, "Ferro is libertas perveniet," "Freedom will be theirs by the sword," and the words, "distinguished for courage," on the reverse. Butler would eventually award 197 of these medals to survivors of the battle, a private acknowledgement of what public records seemed reluctant to fully recognize. The echoes of silence surrounding the achievements at Newmarket Heights would persist for decades, creating a gap in the historical record that subsequent generations would struggle to fill. The reasons for this silence, whether strategic, political, or rooted in the racial attitudes of the era, remained a subject of historical debate long after the guns of the Civil War had fallen silent. Chapter 6. The Other Side of the Radio. While official reports and public accounts of the Battle of Newmarket Heights often presented sanitized or incomplete narratives, a different story emerged from the personal accounts of those who had experienced the battle firsthand. These voices, preserved in diaries, letters, and later interviews, provided glimpses from the other side of the radio, revealing perspectives absent from official channels. One of the most vivid accounts came from Sergeant Major Christian Fleetwood of the 4th USCT, who wrote in his diary entry for September 30th, "Yesterday was a day that will live forever in my memory. I have seen men die before, but never in such numbers, never with such determination to advance despite everything. When Colonel Duncan fell, something changed among the men. It was as if they collectively decided that the position must be taken, no matter the cost." Fleetwood's account continued, "What few will ever understand is how it felt to advance knowing that failure would not merely mean defeat, but would be taken as evidence that men of our race lacked courage. Every step forward was a refutation of that lie." From the Confederate side, Private William Hartman of the 1st Texas Infantry provided a perspective rarely acknowledged in official Southern accounts. In a letter to his sister dated October 10th, he wrote, "The attack came just as dawn was breaking. At first, we could not make out much about the Federal troops in the dim light, but as they drew closer, we were surprised to see they were colored soldiers. Some men made jokes, but the laughter stopped quickly enough when we saw how they kept coming despite our fire. They showed courage that I would not have expected, and in the end our position was indeed in danger of being overrun before orders came to fall back." Lieutenant Thomas Wilkerson, serving with the 5th USCT, described the moments when his regiment joined the attack. "We could see what had happened to Duncan's men. The ground was literally covered with their bodies, many caught in the abatis, others just short of the Confederate works. Yet when the order came to advance over the same ground, there was no hesitation. I heard Sergeant Mills say to his company, 'Today we prove what we are,' and forward they went." Perhaps the most revealing accounts came from the white officers leading the black regiments. Captain Nathan Edgerton of the 6th USCT, in a letter discovered among his papers in 1925, wrote, "What I witnessed today has forever changed my understanding of these men. When I took this commission, I confess I harbored many of the common doubts about whether Negroes would fight effectively. After what I saw at Newmarket Heights, I'm ashamed to have ever entertained such thoughts. Men from my company advanced into fire that would have tested the courage of any soldier of any race I have ever seen." From the command perspective, Colonel Alonzo Draper's private correspondence, not included in his official report, revealed the emotional impact of the battle. In a letter to his wife dated October 4th, he wrote, "The losses among my men were terrible to contemplate. Yet they advanced with a determination that I have rarely witnessed in this war. When I think of what they accomplished and the price they paid, I find myself overcome. These men, many of whom were in bondage not long ago, showed a devotion to the flag and to the cause of freedom that many born in liberty might envy." A particularly revealing document emerged in 1915 when the papers of Dr. Charles Johnson, a surgeon with the 38th USCT, were discovered by his grandson. Johnson's medical log for September 29th included not just clinical observations, but personal reflections. "Treated over 60 wounded men today, many with grievous injuries. What struck me beyond the physical trauma was their demeanor. Even among those most severely wounded, I heard no regrets expressed. Several men, even as I tended their wounds, asked when they might return to their companies. When I told him they had, he smiled and said, "Then it was worth it." These personal accounts revealed aspects of the battle that official reports studiously avoided. The psychological weight carried by the USCT soldiers, fighting not just for victory, but for recognition of their very humanity. The surprised acknowledgement from Confederate troops of the courage displayed by their black opponents, and the profound impact the battle had on white officers who witnessed the determination of their men. One man, Private Lewis Baker, both legs shattered by artillery, used his last breaths to ask whether the Heights had been taken. As Colonel William Woodward of Butler's staff wrote in an unpublished memoir found among his papers in 1930, "What occurred at Newmarket Heights was more than a military engagement. It was a pivotal moment in how these men were perceived, both by their comrades in arms and by the enemy. I heard a captured Confederate officer remark, 'If we had known they would fight like that, we might have considered our position differently.'" Such acknowledgments, however, rarely found their way into official narratives from either side. The gap between official accounts and these personal testimonies highlighted the complex interplay of military reporting, racial attitudes, and political considerations that shaped how the story of Newmarket Heights would be told, or not told, to the American public and to history. Chapter 7. The Return of the Reports. The aftermath of the Battle of Newmarket Heights saw an unusual pattern in how the event was documented and remembered. While initial official reports had been sparse in their recognition of the USCT achievement, over the following years, additional records and testimonies gradually emerged, piecing together a more complete picture of what had occurred on that September morning. The first significant addition to the historical record came in April 1865, when General Butler, no longer in field command, addressed Congress regarding proposed legislation for black civil rights. According to the congressional record, Butler specifically cited Newmarket Heights as evidence of black military contribution. At Newmarket Heights, men who had been denied the rights of citizens proved their worthiness through extraordinary valor. They charged a position that had previously repulsed white troops, suffered casualty rates exceeding 40%, and succeeded where others had failed. If such men can die for their country, surely they deserve the full rights of the country for which they have sacrificed. This public acknowledgement, though politically motivated, brought renewed attention to the battle. In response, the War Department authorized a supplementary report on the engagement, completed in July 1865 by Major William Thomas. This document, titled "The Action at Newmarket Heights, a Supplementary Analysis," provided a more detailed account of the USCT role than had previously been available in official records. Thomas wrote, "The colored troops of General Payne's division, particularly those in Duncan's and Draper's brigades, displayed exceptional courage in their assault on the Confederate works. Despite encountering substantial obstacles, including marshy terrain, 2 lines of abatis, and concentrated enemy fire, these regiments persisted in their attack and ultimately secured the position." The report included testimonies from white officers who had observed the battle, including Captain James Lincoln of the 39th Illinois, who stated, "I witnessed the colored troops' assault from our position to the west. Their determination was remarkable. They continued to advance despite casualties that would have broken the formation of many veteran units I have observed during this war." In 1866, another significant document surfaced when Edward Walker, formerly a war correspondent for the New York Tribune, published his memoir titled 4 Years with the Armies of the Potomac and James. Walker devoted an entire chapter to Newmarket Heights, based on notes he had taken immediately after the battle, but which his editors had declined to publish at the time. Walker wrote, I observed the action from a position approximately 600 yards behind the advancing lines. What I witnessed was nothing short of extraordinary. Men advancing into withering fire, reforming their lines when officers fell, continuing forward despite every impediment. When the survivors finally reached and secured the Confederate works, they had accomplished what many senior officers had privately deemed impossible. Perhaps the most significant addition to the historical record came in 1867, when 14 African-American soldiers who had fought at New Market Heights were belatedly awarded the Medal of Honor for their actions. The citations, preserved in the National Archives, provided specific details of individual acts of courage that had not appeared in the initial battle reports. Sergeant Major Christian Fleetwood's citation read, "Seize the colors," after 2 color-bearers had been shot down and bore them nobly through the fight. Sergeant Alfred Hilton was recognized for having seized both the regimental and U.S. colors, the color-bearers having been shot down, and bore them through the fight. First Sergeant Powhatan Beatty took command of his company, all the officers having been killed or wounded, and gallantly led it. These citations, alongside similar recognitions for 11 other men, represented the first official acknowledgement of specific acts of heroism performed by black troops during the battle. In 1870, an unexpected source added to the historical record when Confederate Brigadier General John Gregg's papers were donated to the Texas State Archives by his widow. Among them was a private report to General Richard Ewell, dated October 5, 1864, which differed significantly from his official battle report. Gregg wrote, "While strategic considerations regarding Fort Harrison necessitated our withdrawal, I must in candor state that the position at New Market Heights had become untenable before orders to withdraw were received. The Federal colored troops attacked with unexpected determination and had broken through our left flank. Another 15 minutes would have seen our position completely overrun, regardless of any orders from higher command." This private admission contrasted sharply with the official Confederate narrative that the position had been abandoned solely for strategic reasons unrelated to the USCT assault. By 1875, enough additional material had emerged that historian George Williams included a detailed account of New Market Heights in his groundbreaking work, History of the Negro Troops in the War of the Rebellion. Williams conducted interviews with survivors and incorporated previously unpublished letters and diaries, creating what would become the most comprehensive 19th-century account of the battle. Williams wrote, "What occurred at New Market Heights on September 29, 1864, stands as perhaps the most conclusive demonstration of the fighting qualities of Negro troops during the entire war. Against formidable defenses and determined resistance, these regiments succeeded through sheer courage and determination, suffering casualties that testify to both the difficulty of their task and their unwavering commitment to completing it." These gradually emerging reports, testimonies, and recognitions created a more complete picture of the battle than had initially been presented. Yet, as Colonel William Woodward noted in an 1880 interview with the Boston Journal, even now, the full story of New Market Heights remains incompletely told. Many of those who could best testify to what occurred are no longer with us, and what documentation exists reflects the biases and limitations of those who created the official record at the time. The return of these reports, spanning more than a decade after the battle itself, gradually filled in gaps in the historical record. Yet questions remained about why such accounts had not been more prominently featured in the immediate aftermath of the battle, and why certain documents seem to have been temporarily misplaced or overlooked during the critical period when the narrative of the battle was first being established. Chapter 8. The Base That Never Sleeps. In the years following the Civil War, as veterans returned to civilian life and the nation struggled with Reconstruction, the Battle of Newmarket Heights might have faded into obscurity like many other engagements of the conflict. Instead, a small but dedicated group of individuals, historians, veterans, and family members, continued to investigate what had happened on that September morning in 1864. One such investigator was Frederick Williams, a former captain in the 22nd United States Colored Troops who had not participated in the battle but had become fascinated by accounts he heard from comrades. In 1873, Williams began what he called the Newmarket Heights Project, systematically collecting testimonies from survivors and searching for records that might shed additional light on the engagement. Williams's papers, discovered in the Harvard University archives in 1922, revealed the challenges he faced. Many official documents seem to have been misplaced or misfiled, he wrote in 1875. Records that should logically exist are reported as lost. When I inquired at the War Department about General Payne's operational orders for September 29th, I was informed that no copies had been preserved. This seems extraordinary, given the significance of the engagement. Despite these obstacles, Williams persisted. By 1878, he had collected testimonies from 43 survivors of the battle and accumulated copies of various reports, letters, and diary entries. This collection, though never formally published during Williams's lifetime, would later become an invaluable resource for historians studying the battle. Parallel to Williams's efforts, the families of soldiers who had fought and died at Newmarket Heights sought recognition for their loved ones' sacrifices. Martha Johnson, whose husband, Sergeant William Johnson of the 36th USCT, had been killed in the battle, began a correspondence campaign in 1877, writing to newspapers, politicians, and military officials. In a letter to the editor of the Chicago Tribune, published November 12, 1877, Johnson wrote, "My husband and hundreds like him gave their lives proving that colored men could fight as bravely as any others. Yet their sacrifice seems to have been deliberately obscured. Why are there monuments to battles of lesser significance, while Newmarket Heights remains uncommemorated?" Johnson's advocacy led to a series of articles in northern newspapers revisiting the battle and questioning why it had received comparatively little attention in histories of the war. The Boston Globe, in an editorial published January 3, 1878, asked, "Is it because the heroes of this battle were black that their achievement has been so systematically minimized in our national memory?" These public discussions prompted the War Department to initiate a review of its records related to the battle. Colonel Marcus Reynolds, assigned to the task, filed a report in April 1878 that noted significant discrepancies and omissions in the official documentation. The casualty reports for Payne's division appear incomplete, Reynolds wrote. Comparing available hospital records with reported losses suggests the actual casualties were substantially higher than officially acknowledged. Furthermore, several after-action reports that should have been included in the official records are missing from department files. Reynolds' review led to the discovery of several documents that had been misfiled, including a detailed map of the Confederate defenses at Newmarket Heights, prepared by Union engineers before the battle, and a report from Brigadier General Charles Payne to General Butler, dated October 1, 1864, providing a more comprehensive account of his division's actions than had previously been available. Payne's report, finally included in supplementary records in 1879, stated explicitly, "The position was taken through direct assault by the colored regiments under my command, who displayed courage of the highest order in overcoming extremely formidable defenses and determined resistance. Their achievement should rank among the most significant demonstrations of battlefield valor in this war." Meanwhile, veterans of the Texas Brigade who had defended Newmarket Heights were constructing their own narrative of the battle. The Hood's Texas Brigade Association, formed in 1872, included the battle in its commemorative activities and publications, though with a distinctly different emphasis than that of USCT veterans and advocates. John Bell of the 5th Texas Infantry, in an address to the association in 1881, described the battle thus: "We held the position as long as was strategically prudent, inflicting severe casualties on the federal force before withdrawing in good order to more defensible positions. That the attacking force was composed of colored troops is incidental. We would have treated any attacking force with the same determination." This Confederate perspective, emphasizing strategic withdrawal rather than tactical defeat, continued to compete with Union accounts emphasizing the USCT achievement. The competing narratives reflected not just different perspectives on a military engagement, but broader societal tensions over the legacy of the war and the place of African Americans in the nation's historical memory. By the mid-1880s, the ongoing investigation into New Market Heights had produced enough material that historian George Thompson undertook the first book-length study of the battle, published in 1886 as The Forgotten Victory, the United States Colored Troops at New Market Heights. Thompson's research uncovered what he described as a pattern of selective documentation in the aftermath of the battle. "The accomplishments of the colored troops," he wrote, "were acknowledged in private correspondence and in the personal reflections of those who witnessed their courage. Yet in official channels, there appears to have been a reluctance to fully credit their achievement, perhaps reflecting concerns about the political implications of such recognition in a nation still deeply divided on questions of race." This observation was supported by a letter Thompson discovered in the personal papers of General William Birney, dated October 18, 1864, and addressed to his brother. Birney wrote, "What I witnessed at New Market Heights would, in any just world, forever silence those who question whether the Negro can fight. Yet I have observed a curious reluctance among certain officers to fully acknowledge what occurred. It is as if the implications of their achievement are too uncomfortable to contemplate." The base of historical investigation never truly slept, as each decade brought new discoveries, new perspectives, and new questions about what had actually occurred at New Market Heights, and how it had been remembered or deliberately forgotten in the aftermath of the battle. Chapter 9. What should never have been found. In the spring of 1891, a discovery was made that would significantly alter the historical understanding of the Battle of New Market Heights. During renovations to the War Department building in Washington, workers discovered a sealed metal box in a wall cavity behind a damaged section of paneling. The box, when opened, contained a collection of documents that appeared to have been deliberately concealed. Among these documents was a folder labeled New Market Heights Classified Correspondence. The papers within, when examined by department officials, proved to be copies of communications between General Butler and General Grant in the weeks before and after the battle. The authenticity of these documents was confirmed by handwriting analysis and comparison with known correspondence between the two generals. The most significant item was a letter from Butler to Grant, dated September 25, 1864, 4 days before the battle. Butler wrote, "I propose to utilize Payne's division of colored troops for the main assault on the New Market position. This will serve two purposes: testing conclusively the fighting qualities of these regiments, and should they succeed, providing a powerful argument for the full citizenship rights that many still deny them is appropriate." Grant's reply, dated September 26th, was cautiously supportive but included a warning. "Your plan is approved, though I urge careful consideration of the terrain and defensive works. These men deserve a fair opportunity to demonstrate their capabilities, not a suicide mission. Ensure that proper reconnaissance and artillery support are provided. This exchange suggested that Butler had specifically selected the USCT regiments for the Newmarket Heights assault, not merely for military reasons, but as a deliberate test of their capabilities, with political implications in mind. More troubling was a subsequent letter from Butler to Grant, dated October 2nd, after the battle. The colored troops performed admirably, as I anticipated they would, though at terrible cost. For reasons which I believe you will understand, I have instructed my staff to moderate the language of official reports regarding their specific achievements. Too effusive praise might inflame certain political sensitivities at a delicate time in the war effort. Rest assured that I intend to recognize their valor through other means when circumstances permit. Grant's response, dated October 4th, was terse. Noted, tactical success is what matters in official records. Other considerations can be addressed after the war is won. This correspondence, never intended for public disclosure, suggested a deliberate decision to downplay the USCT achievement at Newmarket Heights in official accounts for political reasons. When news of the discovery became public, it caused considerable controversy. The Boston Journal, in an editorial published May 12, 1891, wrote, "These documents reveal a calculated effort to deny proper recognition to soldiers who had given their lives in extraordinary numbers. That such recognition was withheld not for military reasons, but for political expediency, represents a betrayal of those who fought and died under the nation's flag." The Nashville Colored Citizen was more pointed in its June edition. "What these papers reveal is nothing less than a conspiracy to rob colored soldiers of their rightful place in history. Their blood was welcome on the battlefield, but acknowledgement of their courage was deemed too politically inconvenient to be fully recorded." Defenders of Butler and Grant argued that their actions had to be understood in the context of the time. The Chicago Tribune, in a counter-editorial on May 20th, suggested, "In the midst of a war for the nation's survival, commanders necessarily made pragmatic decisions about what to emphasize in public communications. Their private recognition of these troops' valor, as evidenced by the Medal of Honor recommendations and Butler's personal medal, demonstrates their true assessment." Beyond the political controversy, the discovered documents included tactical information that shed new light on the battle itself. A detailed reconnaissance report, dated September 27th and signed by Captain William Henderson of the Army Engineers, provided a comprehensive assessment of the Confederate defenses at Newmarket Heights. The position is exceptionally strong, with clear fields of fire across open ground for 300 yards. The double line of abattis is particularly formidable, and the marshy terrain of 4 Mile Creek will impede a coordinated assault. Artillery positions on the height can deliver enfilading fire against any force emerging from the creek bottom. A frontal assault will succeed only at significant cost. This report, which matched Major Anderson's description of his lost reconnaissance, confirmed that Butler had been fully informed of the formidable nature of the defenses his USCT regiments would face. It raised questions about why such a challenging position had been selected for these regiments' major test, and why the artillery preparation described in preliminary orders had been reduced in the final attack plan. Another document in the collection was a memorandum from Butler to his Chief of Staff, dated September 28th, which stated, "The artillery bombardment will be limited to 30 minutes rather than the 2 hours originally planned. The advantage of surprise and the imperative to coordinate with Ord's attack on Fort Harrison necessitate this change." This operational decision, reducing the artillery preparation that might have weakened the Confederate defenses, directly contributed to the high casualty rate among the attacking USCT regiments. Whether this change was made purely for tactical reasons or was influenced by Butler's desire to create a more stringent test of the black troops' fighting qualities remained a matter of speculation. The discovered documents also included a draft of Butler's initial battle report that differed significantly from the version ultimately filed. The draft contained much more explicit praise for the USCT regiments and included details of specific acts of courage later recognized with medals of honor. Marginal notes in Butler's handwriting indicated sections to be removed or modified in the final report, with annotations such as "too emphatic" and "politically inadvisable at present." These documents, never intended to become part of the historical record, revealed the complex interplay of military operations, political calculations, and racial attitudes that had shaped both the battle itself and how it was subsequently portrayed. They suggested that the echoes of silence surrounding the USCT achievement at Newmarket Heights had been, to some degree, deliberately orchestrated rather than simply the result of oversight or conventional military reporting practices. As historian William Thompson wrote in 1893, "The Newmarket Heights documents remind us that what we call history is often as much a product of what is deliberately omitted from the record as what is included. The battle these men fought extended beyond the bloody ground of Newmarket Heights to the historical memory of the nation they helped preserve." Chapter 10. Confrontation in Silence. The revelations from the discovered documents prompted a reassessment of the Battle of Newmarket Heights in both historical and public discourse. As the 19th century drew to a close, a subtle but significant confrontation unfolded, not through direct conflict, but through competing narratives about what had occurred on that September morning in 1864. This confrontation played out most visibly in the pages of veterans' publications. The Grand Army of the Republic's National Tribune published a series of articles in 1892 featuring testimonies from survivors of the battle. Charles Anderson, who had served as a lieutenant in the 4th USCT, wrote, "For years, I have read accounts of various battles that minimize or entirely omit what we achieved at Newmarket Heights. The time has come to state plainly what occurred. We attacked a position of exceptional strength, defended by veteran Confederate troops. We suffered casualties that would have broken many units. Yet we persisted and took the position through direct assault. That this achievement has been obscured or attributed to other factors is a disservice not just to those who fought, but to historical truth." The Confederate Veteran magazine offered a different perspective in an 1893 article titled "The Defense of Newmarket Heights" by Thomas Crockett, formerly of the Texas Brigade. "Much has recently been written about the Federal attack on our position at Newmarket Heights, often exaggerating the significance of the engagement. The facts are straightforward. We held the position as long as was tactically necessary, inflicting severe casualties on the attacking force. When Fort Harrison fell, making our position strategically untenable, we withdrew in good order to more defensible lines. Any suggestion that we were driven from the field by the attacking force contradicts the tactical realities of the day." This narrative battle extended beyond veterans' publications to academic histories and public commemorations. Professor James McPherson of Columbia University, in his 1894 lecture series on the Virginia campaigns of 1864, directly addressed the competing claims. The documentary evidence now available makes it clear that the United States colored troops did indeed take the Newmarket Heights position through direct assault, contrary to Confederate claims of a strategic withdrawal unrelated to their attack. However, it is equally clear that higher command deliberately minimized this achievement in official reports for political reasons. Both these facts represent significant historical findings, the first about the battle itself, the second about how history is constructed through selective documentation. The confrontation extended to physical commemorations as well. In 1895, a group of USCT veterans and their supporters proposed erecting a monument at Newmarket Heights to honor those who had fought and died there. The proposal met resistance from local Virginia authorities, who argued that such a monument would be provocative and historically misleading. After a protracted legal and public relations battle, a compromise was reached. A small marker was permitted, dedicated in 1897, with the deliberately neutral inscription, "To the memory of the American soldiers who fought at Newmarket Heights, September 29, 1864. No mention was made of the USCT regiments or their specific achievement. The dedication ceremony itself became another forum for the silent confrontation. According to newspaper accounts, speakers representing USCT veterans emphasized the courage and sacrifice of the black troops, while representatives of Confederate veterans organizations emphasized the strategic context of the Richmond-Petersburg campaign and the orderly withdrawal of Southern forces from the position. As historian Martha Richardson wrote in her 1900 analysis, "The Battle After the Battle, Newmarket Heights in Historical Memory." What we observe in the discourse surrounding Newmarket Heights is not merely disagreement about tactical details, but a fundamental contest over whose courage deserves recognition, whose suffering merits commemoration, and whose version of events will be enshrined in national memory. Perhaps the most revealing aspect of this confrontation came through the personal correspondence of aging veterans from both sides. In 1898, a remarkable exchange of letters occurred between James Williams, formerly a sergeant in the 6th USCT, and Robert Thompson, who had served as a lieutenant in the 5th Texas Infantry. The correspondence, preserved in the Library of Congress, began when Williams wrote to Thompson after learning they had faced each other at Newmarket Heights. Williams's initial letter was respectful but direct. "I write not to reopen old wounds, but to understand. Our regiment attacked your position at great cost. We believed then, and I believe now, that we drove your forces from that position through direct assault. Yet I continue to read accounts claiming that your withdrawal was unrelated to our attack. As men who were both there, perhaps we can establish some common understanding of what actually occurred." Thompson's reply, dated 2 weeks later, reflected the complex emotions of former enemies. "I appreciate your respectful inquiry. The truth, as I recall it, is not as simple as either side's accounts often suggest. We were indeed ordered to withdraw because of events elsewhere on the line, particularly the fall of Fort Harrison. However, I would be less than honest if I did not acknowledge that your attack was pressing our position hard at the time those orders came. Had the orders been delayed even a short time, the outcome might well have been different. You and your comrades fought with courage that I, having been on the receiving end of it, can attest to without reservation." This private acknowledgement, never intended for public consumption, revealed a more nuanced understanding than the official narratives from either side. It suggested that the truth of what happened at Newmarket Heights lay somewhere between the competing public claims, a perspective that could emerge only through the direct communication of those who had experienced the battle firsthand. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, this silent confrontation over Newmarket Heights continued in historical works, veterans' accounts, and public memory. The battle remained simultaneously acknowledged and obscured, celebrated and minimized, depending on who was telling the story and for what purpose. The documents discovered in 1891 had revealed the deliberate nature of some of these omissions. Yet even with this knowledge, the full integration of the Battle of Newmarket Heights into mainstream Civil War history remained incomplete. a reflection not just of what had happened on the battlefield, but of the nation's ongoing struggle with questions of race, recognition, and historical truth. Chapter 11. Encerramento or Silencing. As the generation that had fought in the Civil War gradually passed from the scene, the Battle of Newmarket Heights faced the prospect of fading from historical memory altogether. By the early 20th century, the engagement received at most a paragraph or two in comprehensive histories of the war, often framed merely as a diversionary action supporting the more significant capture of Fort Harrison. This pattern of minimization continued despite sporadic efforts to preserve and promote awareness of the battle's significance. In 1910, William Wells, who had served as a captain in the 38th USCT and later became a history professor at Howard University, published The Colored Soldiers' Battle, Newmarket Heights Reconsidered. The book, though scholarly and well-documented, received limited distribution and attention outside African-American academic circles. Wells wrote in his preface, "I undertake this work with no small measure of frustration, knowing that events of far less military significance but involving white troops exclusively have been extensively documented and commemorated. That an engagement where 14 African-American soldiers earned the Medal of Honor remains so neglected speaks volumes about the selective nature of our national historical memory. The physical battlefield itself faced threats of erasure. By 1920, much of the ground over which the USCT regiments had advanced had been converted to agricultural use. The Confederate earthworks, though still partially visible, were gradually being leveled by plowing and erosion. No significant preservation efforts were underway, unlike at many other Civil War battlefields, which had already received federal protection. In 1927, a small but symbolic event occurred that highlighted the ongoing process of historical silencing. The Virginia State Historical Commission published a guidebook titled Battlefields of the Richmond-Petersburg Campaign. Newmarket Heights received a single paragraph that stated only, "Union forces captured this position on September 29, 1864, as part of operations against Richmond's outer defenses." No mention was made of the USCT regiments or their achievement. This omission prompted a letter of protest from the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which had begun to take an interest in preserving African-American military history. The NAACP's letter, preserved in the organization's archives, stated, "The systematic exclusion of African-American military contributions from official histories and commemorations represents a form of historical injustice that perpetuates harmful misunderstandings about our nation's past." The Commission's response, while polite, was revealing. Our guidebook is necessarily brief and cannot include every detail of each engagement. We have focused on the strategic significance of actions rather than the specific units involved. This explanation neatly sidestepped the question of why African-American contributions specifically seem to fall consistently into the category of details deemed non-essential. A more substantive effort at historical recovery began in the 1930s when the Works Progress Administration initiated a project to collect oral histories from surviving Civil War veterans. Though few USCT veterans from Newmarket Heights were still alive, the project did record the testimony of William Anderson, who had served as a private in the 4th USCT and was 92 years old when interviewed in 1937. Anderson's account, preserved in the Library of Congress, provided a vivid, first-hand description. The ground was wet, and we had to cross a swampy place before reaching their fortifications. Men were falling all around me. Our color-bearer was shot down, and another man took the flag, and he was shot too. Still, we kept going forward. When we finally reached their works, many of the rebels had already left, but some were still there, and we drove them out. I remember thinking, we've done what they said we couldn't do. Despite such testimonies, the battle remained marginalized in broader historical narratives. The 1936 publication, A Military History of the United States, used as a textbook at West Point, mentioned Newmarket Heights only in passing as part of diversionary operations north of the James River. This pattern of minimization and exclusion represented a form of historical silencing, not through active suppression, but through selective emphasis and de-emphasis, decisions about what merited detailed attention and what could be relegated to footnotes or omitted entirely. By the mid-20th century, even the precise location of the battlefield had become uncertain. When military historian Robert Crick attempted to create a detailed map of the engagement in 1956, he discovered that local knowledge of the battle had largely disappeared, and that even the road network had changed significantly since 1864, making it difficult to precisely locate key positions. In his research notes, preserved at the Virginia Historical Society, Crick wrote, "It is as if the battle has been erased not just from historical memory, but from the landscape itself. Few local residents can identify where the action took place with any specificity, and physical traces of the engagement have largely disappeared through agricultural use and natural processes." This physical erasure paralleled the historical marginalization of the battle. By the centennial commemoration of the Civil War in the 1960s, Newmarket Heights received almost no attention among the many events, publications, and commemorations marking the conflict's 100th anniversary. The silencing was not complete, however. Throughout this period, a thin but persistent thread of historical memory was maintained primarily through African American historical organizations, veterans' descendants, and specialized military historians interested in USCT operations. The Howard University History Department maintained a small collection of materials related to the battle, including copies of commendations, letters, and photographs of Butler Medal recipients. The Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in New York accumulated similar materials, creating repositories of information that, while not widely accessed, ensured that the documentary basis for understanding the battle was not entirely lost. In 1968, amid the civil rights movement and renewed interest in African American history, historian Benjamin Qualls included a substantial account of Newmarket Heights in his groundbreaking work, The Negro in the Civil War. Qualls wrote, "The action at Newmarket Heights represented perhaps the most convincing demonstration of black military capability during the entire war. That it has been so consistently underrepresented in historical accounts reflects not its military insignificance, but rather the discomfort its implications caused in a society struggling with questions of racial equality." Qualls's work marked the beginning of a gradual recovery of Newmarket Heights in historical memory, a process that would accelerate in subsequent decades as both military and social historians began to reassess African American contributions to the Union War effort. Yet even as this recovery began, the long period of relative silence had taken its toll. Much potentially valuable documentary evidence had been lost. Many personal accounts had gone unrecorded before their bearers passed away, and the physical landscape of the battlefield had been altered beyond easy recognition. The process of historical silencing, once set in motion, created gaps in the record that could never be fully filled. As historian Martha Richardson observed in her 1970 study, Selective Memory, The Case of Newmarket Heights, what we confront in studying this battle is not merely the challenge of interpreting available evidence, but the more fundamental problem of evidence that was never preserved, or that was deliberately excluded from the historical record. The silences in the archive are as historically meaningful as what was preserved. The partial enclosure or silencing of Newmarket Heights in historical memory represented not just an academic question, but a lasting consequence of the complex racial dynamics that had shaped both the battle itself and how it would be remembered or forgotten by subsequent generations. Chapter 12. The sound that still echoes on a crisp autumn morning in September 2014, 150 years after the Battle of Newmarket Heights, a small ceremony took place on what historians had identified as the approximate ground where the USCT regiments had made their final push against the Confederate earthworks. Unlike the grand sesquicentennial commemorations at Gettysburg, Antietam, or Vicksburg, this was a modest gathering, perhaps 100 people, including historians, local officials, military representatives, and descendants of soldiers who had fought there. The ceremony marked the dedication of a new interpretive marker, replacing the small, generically worded stone placed in 1897. The new marker explicitly acknowledged the USCT achievement. On this ground, on September 29, 1864, regiments of the United States colored troops attacked and captured heavily defended Confederate positions after suffering severe casualties. 14 African-American soldiers received the Medal of Honor for their actions here, the largest number awarded to black soldiers for a single engagement during the Civil War. This belated recognition represented the culmination of a gradual process of historical recovery that had accelerated in recent decades. Beginning in the 1970s, military historians had reassessed the strategic significance of the battle, concluding that it had indeed played a more important role in the Richmond-Petersburg campaign than previously acknowledged in mainstream histories. In 1982, historian James Price published The Battle of Newmarket Heights, Freedom Will Be Theirs by the Sword, the first comprehensive modern study of the engagement. Drawing on previously overlooked or underutilized sources, Price established a detailed timeline of the battle and provided the first accurate casualty figures, revealing that the USCT regiments had suffered losses exceeding 40%. Among the highest casualty rates of any Union assault during the entire war. Price wrote, "What emerges from a comprehensive examination of the evidence is not merely a footnote to the Fort Harrison operation, but a significant engagement in its own right, one that demonstrated the fighting capabilities of African-American troops under the most challenging conditions, and that directly contributed to the eventual fall of Richmond by securing the critical Newmarket Road approach." Archaeologist William Thompson's survey of the battlefield in 1990 identified previously unknown features, including remnants of the Confederate abatis and evidence of the marshy conditions that had hampered the Union advance. Thompson's report concluded, "The physical evidence confirms contemporary accounts of the extraordinarily difficult terrain these troops had to traverse under fire, making their eventual success all the more remarkable." By the early 21st century, Newmarket Heights had been incorporated into the National Register of Historic Places, and portions of the battlefield were acquired for preservation by the Civil War Trust, later the American Battlefield Trust. Though much of the ground remained in private hands, the core of the battlefield was now protected from development, ensuring that future generations would have the opportunity to visit and understand what had occurred there. These developments reflected a broader reassessment of African-American military contributions during the Civil War. Historian Joseph Glatthaar, in a 2010 article in the Journal of Military History titled Black Soldiers and the Civil War, a Reappraisal, wrote, "Engagements like Newmarket Heights force us to reconsider not just the specific tactical achievements of USCT regiments, but the larger question of how African-American military service shaped both the course of the war and its ultimate meaning for American society." Yet despite this gradual recovery in historical scholarship and public commemoration, echoes of the original silence continued to reverberate. A 2012 survey of leading American history textbooks found that only 3 out of 12 mentioned Newmarket Heights at all, and none provided more than a single sentence about the engagement. Popular documentaries and films about the Civil War similarly continued to give minimal attention to the battle, if they mentioned it at all. This persistent marginalization reflected what historian Robert Cook termed the inertia of historical narrative. Once established patterns of emphasis and de-emphasis tend to persist even as scholarly understanding evolves. In the case of Newmarket Heights, the long period during which the battle had been minimized or overlooked in mainstream histories created a legacy that proved difficult to fully overcome. At the 2014 sesquicentennial commemoration, Dr. James Brewer, a descendant of Sergeant Major Christian Fleetwood, addressed this continuing challenge. The struggle these men faced did not end when they took those Confederate works. In many ways, it continued long after, in the struggle for recognition, for accurate historical memory, for acknowledgement of what their sacrifice meant then and what it means now. That struggle continues even today. Indeed, the recovery of Newmarket Heights in historical memory remained incomplete. Much of what occurred on that September morning in 1864 could never be fully reconstructed. Too many documents had been lost, too many personal accounts had gone unrecorded, too many physical traces had disappeared from the landscape. Yet the fundamental facts had been established beyond reasonable doubt. Regiments of the United States colored troops had attacked and captured a strongly defended position at great cost, demonstrating a level of courage and determination that impressed even their Confederate opponents. 14 of their number had performed acts of valor recognized with the nation's highest military decoration. Their achievement had been deliberately minimized in initial reports for political reasons, setting in motion a pattern of historical marginalization that would persist for generations. As the small group gathered for the sesquicentennial commemoration departed that autumn morning in 2014, the battlefield once again fell silent. But it was no longer the silence of historical erasure, rather the contemplative silence of a place where significant events had occurred, where men had demonstrated extraordinary courage, and where a chapter of American history, though long obscured, had finally begun to receive its proper recognition. The sound of their achievement continued to echo, faintly but persistently, in the ongoing work of historians, in the preserved portions of the battlefield, in the memories maintained by descendants, and in a gradually expanding awareness of what had occurred when the black troops took Newmarket Heights while the generals watched in silence. In his closing remarks at the commemoration ceremony, historian James Price perhaps best captured this persistent echo. What happened here was more than a military engagement. It was a demonstration of courage that helped change how a nation understood the capabilities and rights of a people long denied full citizenship. The men who fought here did more than capture a tactical position. They struck a blow against prejudice and laid a claim to equality that, while not immediately recognized, could never be entirely silenced. Their achievement continues to speak to us across the generations, reminding us of both how far we have come and how far we still have to go. As with many aspects of the Civil War, the Battle of Newmarket Heights remained not simply a historical event to be studied, but a living legacy to be reckoned with, its meaning continuing to evolve as each generation approached it with new questions, perspectives, and understandings. The sound of what occurred there on September 29, 1864, still echoed, for those willing to listen across the intervening years.